France is our oldest ally. The French people have stood shoulder to shoulder with the United States time and again. We want to be very clear that we stand together with them in the fight against terrorism and extremism. Paris itself represents the timeless values of human progress. Those who think that they can terrorize the people of France or the values that they stand for are wrong.
President Obama earlier this evening offering a statement in support of France in the wake of terror attacks, multiple attacks, some of them taking place simultaneously in the City of Lights, shootings in a restaurant, hostages taken at a concert hall, and an explosion near a soccer stadium. More than 60 people have been killed. Sadly, that number is expected to grow throughout the night. Along with Miranda Khan, J.D. Hayworth back with you on Newsmax Prime, and we are pleased to be joined now via Skype from Boulder, Colorado, by Republican Congressman Mike Coffman. Mike is the only member of Congress to be a veteran of both Iraq wars. He serves on the House Armed Services Committee and the Committee on Veterans Affairs. Mike, you're back home in Colorado. We know this is a developing story, but, sir, we'd like to get your initial reaction to news of the attacks in Paris.
Well, I think it's a tremendous tragedy, and my heart goes out to the French people. And they have been resolute in the past when they've been under similar attacks. Although this is clearly the greatest magnitude in terms of what they've endured, I think, from the standpoint of terrorism inside the city itself. And so clearly this is an effort by radical jihadists, at least I certainly believe it is, to get the French to disengage in their fight in the war against terrorism.
Congressman, again, we don't know who exactly is responsible for these attacks, but how concerned are you for the security of the people here in the United States?
Well, I think we have to be very concerned about the security of the people in the United States, and I'm obviously alarmed as well that the president would want to close Guantanamo Bay and bring the worst of the worst to our shores and allow them all the due process rights that an American citizen is afforded under the Constitution, and whether or not a judge would simply allow them out of detention, I think would be of concern.
And Mike, continuing in that vein, in light of these attacks tonight in Paris, your concern about Gitmo and closing the prison there, as we understand it, this White House is considering sending some of those prisoners to your home state of Colorado. Now, you've written a letter to the president. Could you fill us in on what you had to say?
Well, certainly I've written a letter to the White House to the president stating that my reasons that why these what I consider irregular enemy combatants should come on U.S. soil. I think one is clearly to put them under our legal system, and the president views terrorism as just another criminal justice problem. Not as an act of war. I view it as an act of war. And so, in that view, we ought to hold enemy combatants, even if they're irregular enemy combatants, in detention until hostilities are over with, however long that takes. And what the president doesn't want to admit is that we are at war, whether we like it or not, with radical Islamists who have declared war on the United States and our allies. And so however long it takes for those hostilities to be over, anybody who's plucked from the battlefield and detained needs to remain in detention until hostilities are over with. And this administration has released a number of these terrorists, and a lot of them, I think 29% by the Department of Defense's own calculation, have recidivated or returned to the battlefield.
Congressman, I want to ask you, in the short time that we have remaining, 20 seconds, some have argued that the president doesn't have the legal authority to do this on his own. Do you agree?
I agree, absolutely. And I think that it would be an incredible overreach of his power, and it clearly unconstitutional. The president has just signed the National Defense Authorization Act, which has language in it that prohibits, that extends the prohibition on his moving these terrorists onto U.S. soil. And so the president can come up with all the legal theories that he wants, but clearly it violates the law.
Congressman Mike Coffman, as I mentioned earlier, the only member of Congress to be a veteran of both wars in Iraq. Sir, we thank you for your time. You heard what Mike had to say, both about the Paris attacks and the possibility of closing Gitmo. We'd love to get your comments. Send your comments to newsmaxtv.com/comments, and we'll be right back.